Welcome to Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. I'm Michael Grosvenor.
And I'm Jack Fernino. Join us as we dig deep into Billy Joel's songs and history and what his music has meant to us.
Honesty is hardly ever heard, and mostly what I need from you. Don't talk to me, I hate you, I don't want to ever be with these people again, leave me alone, I don't want to get on a plane, I don't want to get out of bed, no, I want my refrigerator. You are so beautiful. When I was in high school, oh, here comes Billy Joel, here comes Billy Joel. And now it's, here comes Billy Joel, it's Billy Joel.
Years before Billy Joel started doing masterclasses, and long before MTV stopped showing music videos, there was Night School.
Broadcast in late 1982, Night School was a half-hour show on MTV where Billy fielded questions from an audience of young fans. Fresh off the success of the Nylon Curtain, he tells stories, gives some behind-the-scenes glimpses of the music industry, and of course, plays piano. The program turned out to be a one-off event. There was never a second episode or another version with a different host or musician. At the time, MTV was a new and untested concept, and Night School is a relic of when the channel was at its most daring and experimental. The show is a diamond in the rough for Billy Joel fans. It's currently only available on YouTube, and it doesn't get much attention from fan forums, biographies, or any official publications. But it features Billy in a great mood, cracking jokes, and telling stories he'd refine and rehash for later interviews. It's a rare, candid insight to the artist, in between the release of his most artistically ambitious album, and just before the lighter, more pop-oriented and innocent Man would launch him into the next level of superstardom with a new generation of fans. Join us as we dig deep into Billy Joel's MTV Night School from 1982.
So you didn't know you were going to be on TV, huh? Now this is good training for people who want to get in show business. This is on the firing line, so it's good practice. I got to do it. You got to do it. Okay, so X.
A few episodes ago, we talked with Johnny Lyde, who did a great reimagining of the Nylon Curtain album. While we were setting up that interview, I had mentioned that including that episode, we had 3 Nylon Curtain era centric episodes on tap for the year. Well, it turns out now there's 4. It just occurred to me that this would be another Nylon Curtain era item to cover, and that is the Billy Joel MTV Night School from 1982. And this is an often overlooked piece of Billy Joel memorabilia. We don't see a lot of clips from it. There's not a lot of great copies of it up on the YouTube. I mean, they're there, but they're clearly ripped from VHS. This is a great find, if you're looking for a great gift for the person who has everything Billy, I don't know, send them this link. In all seriousness, this is one actually I wasn't really that familiar with at all. I think I've heard you mention it, Michael. Yeah. But I'd certainly never seen it before this. What's interesting about it to me is, in the 90s, especially after the River of Dreams era where he had stopped putting out albums, Billy was really ramping up the master classes. He did a ton of them in the 90s and later, and some sprinkled throughout prior as well, but certainly he accelerated that then. This seems to be the first glimpse of a Billy Joel masterclass that I've ever seen. So it's fascinating to see Billy kind of at the peak of his recording career doing one of these. Yeah, not only will it foreshadow the masterclasses, there's also some accounts of things he says in this that he'll either start saying more often later, or we get little bits and pieces of different stories that we've either heard before, or they get more fleshed out. It's a little bit of Billy Joel Project Object if we have any other Zappa fans in the audience here. It's just these little bits of artifacts of the Billy Joel universe that either start here, continue through this, or continue to evolve in this episode. Like so many great storytellers and so many, musicians and artists at Billy's caliber who have gotten interviewed hundreds of thousands of times, you inevitably get asked the same questions. And so you've got a catalog of stories to pull from. It is interesting to see, where some of these stories sat in 82. because they would develop even further as time went on. And
I mentioned Uncle Frank a moment ago. Before we get into it, I want to mention that I don't know where he sits in this exactly, but when I first heard Night School, I was reminded of a section of the real Frank Zappa book in a chapter called Failure. Okay. I'm going to read a couple quick excerpts here and you'll see why it's, first of all, why it's relevant to this, but also I really always love the chapter of this book because it's something that like no other rock star ever talks about, you know?
yeah,
Except, you know, Billy's one to like admit when he made a mistake here and there, but you know, this is a great idea. So he writes, he and his ghostwriter write, failure is one of those things that serious people dread. Invariably, the persons most likely to be crippled by this fear are people who have convinced themselves that they are so bitchin' they shouldn't ever be placed in a situation where they might fail. Failure is nothing to get upset about. It's a fairly normal condition, an inevitability in 99% of all human undertakings. Success is rare. That's why people get so cranked up about it. Here are a few examples from my own personal collection of crumbled dreams. These are excerpts from actual business proposals presented to guys with suits on in the real world. Even though they all flopped, the very idea of walking into a corporate office and dropping one of these boogers on Mr. Show Me's desk made it all worthwhile. A guy's got to have a hobby. So then he goes through these, some of these like crazy things he's come up with over the years. But I should mention that he proposed CDs at one point, a proposal for a system to replace phonograph record merchandising. Talks about the limitations of vinyl, and then says new digital technology may eventually solve the warpage problem and provide the consumer with better sound quality in the form of compact discs, in parentheses, CDs. They are smaller, contain more music, and will presumably cost less to ship. So obviously this is, he had come up with this before the discs came out. Okay, then he goes on, we propose to acquire the rights to digitally duplicate the best of every record company's quality catalog items, store them in a central processing location, and have them accessible by phone or cable TV, directly patchable into the user's home taping appliances with the option of direct digital transfer. So basically, he comes up with either the idea for streaming music over the internet or the TV music channels that we have today.
he was always such a forward thinker.
He really was, and it's so funny that this book was written in 1988. Obviously, compiles years of his ideas here, and they were in there.
Yeah.
I mentioned those two as fun, but then we have this. This must have happened later. Another miserable flop was a concept for a late-night TV show in 1987. I embarked on a depressing journey into the air-conditioned wilderness of TV land, pitching ideas to groups of individuals worthy of further anthropological study. It all began with a meeting in the ABC network office on or about March 13th, 1987. The title of it was Night School, a late-night adult program, 60 minutes, 5 nights per week. He would be the host, and they had a permanent faculty and a pool of visiting professors. And they would show raw, uncut news footage from the daily satellite feed, point out the material other broadcasters have deleted, speculate on the possible motivations behind the deletions, and refresh people's memories about recent events connected to each day's breaking stories. So sort of like The Daily Show, if you would.
It's kind of like a combination of The Daily Show and like some of those like political roundtables you would see on like Sunday mornings.
And then he goes on, he comes out these things. MTV has shown an interest in the joint venture on this segment. The news in heavy rotation weekly summary would air on MTV each Saturday. At least 2 brand new music videos would be constructed each day using Zappa's music or any artist willing to license their material at a special rate. Working on a 24-hour delay, yesterday's news footage would be converted into 3-minute rock videos called News in Heavy Rotation. As I was looking at it first, I thought that Zappa had pitched it before actual Night School on MTV, but I still thought it was a nice crossover between 2 of my own fandoms, so
Yeah,
I figured I'd go for it. You'll get another clear shot at Metallica in an upcoming episode.
Right.
But I did think, aside from this, it was an interesting moment to go back to this book that I had read a whole bunch of times when I was younger. It's so funny to look at a guy that was that successful write a whole chapter about failure, and half of these ideas ended up becoming successful 20 to 30 years after his death.
Yeah, no kidding. I always love artists, whether it be like a Zappa that just has so many crazy ideas that the struggle with him is like getting somebody to take a chance on it. So I love, that aspect too. And, and I love also, Billy's whole thing too, where, he's a guy who's been through the ringer of the music business and, he kind of wants to show the way a bit and just kind of use his experience to help other people who are going to try to do what he's doing.
So yeah, with that, let's get into Billy Joel's episode of Night School, which aired on MTV in 1982.
I did some digging around, and I wasn't able to find any other instance of MTV doing something like this then.
Yeah, when you search Night School MTV, all that really comes up is the Billy Joel stuff, and then on the first page of Google is like one article about the Zappa one. On Wikipedia for Pressure the Song, it says in Night School, a show airing on MTV in 1982 that ran roughly a half hour long, in which he answers questions posed by audience members. Billy Joel reveals that the pressure he was talking about in the song was something along the lines of writing pressure and pressure to provide.
I wonder if this was always intention to be a one-off that they did with Billy, or was this something that MTV was looking to become a series that just never went anywhere after this one episode?
Yeah. Now, in The Gothamist, there's an article, We Want Our MTV. Here's what was happening on MTV in 1982. It's important to realize that MTV was only a year old at that point, so they were definitely trying out different things. And the blurb here is, on Night School, a show airing on the channel in 1982, Billy Joel answered audience questions from his piano bench. This is the year he would premiere his video for Pressure, a song which he discusses in the below clip. So it does sound like this is the only time they did it. And, you wonder if, it was, maybe this was the pilot, or that's just what they called this one, but it's exciting to think that this was, back in those, sort of Wild West days of MTV, where they were just throwing stuff against the wall and just trying out whatever they wanted to see what worked.
Yeah, definitely. In those first 2 years or so of MTV, they really were just trying to come up with any kind of content they could. This is before every artist was making a video for everything they ever did. Their first year, it was like, there were not like pretty much any music video was getting on the air because there just wasn't that much to pull from. So I think MTV was really still trying to figure out its programming at this point and just trying to, like you said, throw things against the wall and see what worked. And I mean, I loved it, but I can imagine it not taking off. I can certainly picture that.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, this was a great concept. It really reminds me of what Billy would say at the beginning of at least one of his master classes, where he talked about, he wrote a letter to the Beatles being like, how did you write this? Blah, blah, blah. He's trying to get like inside baseball, and he got back, send $5 for your autographed picture.
Yeah.
And so his whole thing was, I want to answer those questions for other people. And he was doing it, even this far back.
Yeah. And, this is 82. So he was 33. This clearly was his, the meat of the prime of his career as a recording artist and as a pop culture person, I guess you could say. It was just so cool to see Billy talking about this stuff while he's still in the thick of it, while he's still in the thick of writing records, making records, and touring with behind it and making videos. Most of these later master classes, he has some distance from a lot of it. So I really liked seeing Billy in the thick of it talk through it.
And, especially when we'll get to it, when he talks about the music industry in particular, how funny are the things that he says specifically about, music as product and things like that, with all the, all the criticism that will get levied against MTV later on.
Right. Yeah.
I guess it's another testament to, how revolutionary and free the channel was when it started. It was anything goes, man. Like, the guy that did Headbangers Ball, he got fired because when they started playing grunge on Headbangers Ball, all the metalheads wrote in complaining, and he wrote back, yeah, I agree with you guys. I wish I could do more metal, but they won't let me. They want to put grunge in there.
Right.
And then people found out about it, or he wrote or emailed, whatever it was. And then, the brass found out and they fired him over it.
Yeah.
By the early 90s, like that was kind of no more,
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, let's take a look at this half-hour curio, a little slice of life from Billy Joel, so to speak. Now, here's my question to you. Do you think these questions were planted? Because the people sounded either nervous or like bad actors, and I can't decide which one it was.
I think it was more nerves.
Yeah.
I feel like it was pretty organic, and Billy seemed kind of, he even made comments on like his approach with choosing who to pick from.
Right.
So yeah, I think it was just, nervous kids, students asking these questions who, one, they're talking to Billy Joel, and two, they've got a camera on them. So I think it was just a combination of that.
I'll bet you like there was some sort of pre-screening going on, like maybe MTV. Yeah, they were like, all right, that's just don't raise your hand, you know.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you have a good question, you know how to ask it, that kind of thing.
It wasn't like a Kevin Smith Q&A where like anyone and everyone gets up there and says whatever.
Yeah, but they were, why too? Because they were really well structured. They were like, I kind of call it like the Terry Gross,
Yeah.
so to speak, and like, you start with the statement and then you ask the question. Like, it's actually, I think Terry Gross does it well, but that was something, we learned after I was done with film, I then continued my schooling in journalism.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of what they taught you was to, you construct it by, establishing the statement, so there's context for the person you're interviewing, and then you ask the question based on that information. People tend not to do that like out in the real world or casually. You don't structure things that formally. You get more of the Chris Farley show stuff. You remember when you were in the Beatles?
It said Paul is dead. That was a hoax, right? Yeah, well, I'm
awesome.
not really dead.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
Idiot.
Stupid. Idiot, yeah.
But you're right. They do seem largely structured that way. And it makes for good television.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if those are real questions and somebody was like, ask it like this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So starting off the show, they show a few clips of what's to come. You see a clip of Honesty, and then one of Billy's famed Joe Cocker impression, and a couple other miscellaneous clips. And Billy comes out to a round of applause as expected. And one thing I noticed, you could already tell he was just visibly in a good mood out of the gate. To me, he just seemed loose right up front. Like he was ready to have a good time, and he just looked happy to be there.
Yeah, well, as we learn later, he's very comfortable doing these Q&As, and he enjoys them. So, probably a lot more fun than getting asked the same stupid interview questions again.
What's nice about these as opposed to media interviews is you're going to get much more interesting, not that you're not going to get interesting questions from, general media questions, but you're getting a different angle. You're getting someone who wants to go into the craft that you're doing. So I think he really enjoys that. So he walks on stage. He says, this is good training for people who want to get into show business. And he says, if I got to do it, you got to do it. And then
I like that he addresses that head on.
Yep. And then I like this. And then so bluntly, he goes, so X. That's the way to get people to start asking questions.
No pretense, no preamble.
And so the first question is the person who is asking,
your new release, Pressure, is obviously like an influence of the music business on you. Do you think when you were younger and trying to get into the music business, the pressure was more intense, or now that you've made it, the pressure is even more intense?
No, pressure is relative. When I was starting out and trying to get things going, the pressure was, if you don't get things going, they're going to throw you out of this apartment. That was that kind of pressure. It's like, I'm hungry, and my stomach was going, pressure, food. So I think that's pretty intense pressure. The pressure I was writing about in this song wasn't necessarily music business pressure. It was writing pressure. Like, I always think of the novelist, like Joseph Wambaugh or somebody. They're going to sit down, they're going to start a new novel, and there's the typewriter, and there's the paper rolled into the typewriter, and the typewriter's sitting there going, come on, man. Come on. And that's, for those of you who tried to write, you absolutely have no control. You go into the twilight zone, that's it. Do-do-do-do. A young songwriter has just entered the twilight zone. And you're sitting there, and that pressure, at the time I was saying, well, I got to write some more stuff for the album. I was about halfway through. And I said, well, what am I going to do? I don't have any ideas. It's gone. It's dead. I have nothing. There's nothing. And then the woman who's my secretary came into the house at that point and said, wow, you look like you're under a lot of pressure. I bet you that'd be a good idea for a song. And I went, thank you. So I give her the credit, but none of the publishing, okay?
And I thought that was a great question to start.
It's unexpected, but it is a good one.
Because as Billy would go on to say, pressure is certainly very relative, and both ends of the spectrum, struggling artists and successful artists, both have very real, very big sets of pressures.
Yeah.
And so, Billy talks about that and how, when he was younger, starting out, it's like, the pressure is, you don't keep the gig or get the gig, you run the risk of losing your apartment, you need food, put food on the table, the very primitive stresses and pressure of survival.
Not to, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback this 40 years later. But, the great follow-up question would be, how does that affect your writing when the pressures are different?
Billy uses it himself to segue into what pressure was really about, was songwriting pressure, which I don't think this is, because I think this is a song he really hasn't talked about much since this album. He's played it a lot, but he hasn't really discussed it. And so it was really interesting to learn how pressure was actually written about essentially writer's block.
Which is ironic because it's such a universal song. Like I really think it's successful because it's about, just became about so much more. Anybody can project their thing on it.
Well, and that's kind of one of the geniuses of Billy is he's able to take something very personal and make it universal.
Yeah.
The follow-up question to that, the next person comes up and asks,
wait for the...
Given all the pressure, given all your energy, and given the music business what it always is and probably always will be, did you ever feel like quitting, and what made you change your mind?
it never even entered my mind not to do it, ever.
So that's kind of interesting that, at that point, it's something that never even entered his mind.
I find that to be an astoundingly significant yet often overlooked point. Not only for Billy, but, when you think about it for any of these musicians, like, we talked about pre-Cold Spring Harbor, Billy was living in a laundromat, didn't have anything going on. You got to remember just how insurmountable the odds seem for people like this, because I think it's a little easier in a way now, but especially back then it was like you starved, man. These people just really kind of lived it, and there was no guarantee that they were going to make it.
Right.
And to that point, it's always important to remember, if that failed musician in your life that wouldn't give up the dream before you make fun of them, just remember that could have been any of your favorite musicians, had things just not broken a certain way.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to think about, if you ever wonder, what makes a successful musician successful, it's that. It's not even that failure isn't an option. That's silly bravado,
Yeah.
It's that quitting isn't the option. It's just this is just what I do. This is not something I want to do. This is not something I decided to do.
Yeah.
The thought that it doesn't even enter your mind, that you're just taking it as par for the course, is such a difference.
Absolutely. And, he's a lifer. I mean, and that's why anytime, even in his later quote unquote retirement years from recording and everything like that, even when it seemed like he was going to stop playing live, it would always call him back. It's always in him. And it's a rare breed of artists who never can turn it off. It's interesting. I've read up on so many bands I always loved growing up, and whose records I listened to all the time, and it just boggles my mind that some of my favorite musicians are now completely out of the music business, who don't write, don't perform, do anything anymore, but they're so good, and it just breaks your heart to see some incredible artists. They just don't have that in them. What Billy has just never stop.
Billy probably would have never stopped, but it's important to remember in that same vein, as we learned in our Piano Man episode, had that one student in California not gone on this ridiculous crusade to resurrect Piano Man, the world would be a very different place.
He jokes a bit about talking down on artists and musicians, when are you going to get a real job? What he does isn't work.
Right.
But then he frames it with this funny story, how, he had a cousin who would always say that to him.
People start talking out. My cousin, right, in Ohio, when are you going to get a real job? We were just starting out, and we're working in these little clubs, and slime hanging off the walls, and there was no cold cuts. My cousin would show up. It's my cousin from Ohio, and he'd be backstage and he'd drink all the crew's beer, and he would eat all the cold cuts on this, what we call the seagull platter. We call it the seagull platter. And he would, when are you going to get a real job, or when are you going to work for a living? Work for a living, right? And the crew loved him. The band really loved this guy. And then about 4 years ago, he asked me for $50,000. You know what I mean? And I told him, well, when I get a real job, we'll talk about it.
I want to make an interjection here, and I'm going to tell a completely unverified story. You know the site Quora, where like anybody can ask a question and anybody can answer it. So
Yeah.
we're talking as reliable as Wikipedia here, or Setlist FM. Somebody was like, talking about, is Billy Joel a nice guy? He's like, well, I'm going to tell you this story. I was working, so wherever, and at soundcheck, he would come on and he would tell all these jokes and stuff, and everybody would laugh. And then like the next day, he would tell the same jokes, and everybody would laugh. It's like, I was just so disgusted, like, oh, we gotta stroke his ego and like laugh at the same jokes every night. Like, is that the kind of thing? And I'm like, and I immediately thought, no, that's how you develop your banter. You think a comedian does a special like just off the cuff? No, they tell the jokes how many times, you get the rhythm down, get the words right,
He's working out material.
And once again, to take it back to Zappa real quick, one of the things I realized early on when I got the internet, like in high school, was I was just kept looking up Frank Zappa every chance I got. And I started to realize that he would give the same answers over and over to the same questions, in various interviews, which is another side tangent is why, I really latched on to the Terry Gross thing when I went to school for journalism, that idea of like, you can use that to like acknowledge the question everyone asks and ask something new,
Yeah.
So Billy, how many times have we heard these things from Billy? Well, number one, it's because they keep asking him the same question. But number two, if you listen closely, you can hear him workshop it over the years. You know, if you pay enough attention to them, they keep refining. It's like a comedian's bit. So it's like it's on one hand, like it's a little canned.
Yep.
On the other hand, it's maximized for like great effect.
I always likened it to like Jerry Seinfeld working through his material. He just happens to play a bunch of songs in between. Next question was asking him what came first, music or lyrics. Billy's always stayed true to this. He's always said music comes first. And he did go into the sodomy story.
But it's a variation.
This is before Liberty got the credit for sodomy.
When I got to writing songs, that's where I came. It was like, well, I feel music first. I feel the melody first. And then the lyric, to me, is kind of kicked off by if I like a melody. If melody creates an image already, or a feeling, or a mood, now you got to have a title. You got to have a title. Like Honesty. I was writing Honesty. It was originally Sodomy, okay? But, right, real, tender song. Sodomy. Such a lonely word, But now whether it's a bailout title, a phony title, a working title, but the title to me is like, that's, the melody always comes to that title, the way I write anyway, but I do write the music first.
Again, that's something I wonder about, when these stories change, how much of it sometimes is ego versus how much of it is, sometimes you tweak the details just to get to the punchline. If you don't have time for the right setup, you just leave out the fact that like we were in the studio and I heard the drummer sing. That's like, if you have more time, you expand on that.
Yeah.
Tell the whole story with the whole setup, but like in the rapid fire thing, you have to get to the point. So the alternate take of that is, it was just, the original words were sodomy. I always kind of felt like it was funny that, the original story was Liberty was like, I hate, about
Only the Good Die Young.
Yeah, I hate reggae. We're not doing reggae. We're not from Jamaica, the closest we've got. And then it's come out over the years. It was, you can't play reggae. Like, we love reggae.
Right, we love reggae.
Working.
We've played reggae, but we can't, the Billy Joel band, can't pull it off. It didn't work coming from Billy.
I think there's less pride in taking the credit for sodomy.
Right, exactly. There's the bit from this one. I think there's less pride in taking the credit for sodomy. That out of context sounds hilarious.
Is that the thing you're going to like put at the end of the episode, like 10 seconds?
It's going to be the Easter egg at the very end.
No, that's what you're going to put. It's going to be when, like in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be like scrolling through Facebook And I'm going to see episode number whatever is out. Here's a sneak peek, and I'm going to hit play. And it's going to be me going.
It's going to be just that.
There's no pride taking credit for sodomy. Dude, are we going to get the little E on Spotify for this one if we keep this up?
Right? Yeah. That's our new slogan, our new tagline for the podcast. And another thing, he does, I think he plays a bit of like, oh, here's an example of when I tried to write lyrics first, and he was just coming up with these dumb lyrics and trying to force a melody into it. And basically just illustrating that for him, it just doesn't work to try lyrics first.
Now, funny enough, if I remember correctly, Jimi Hendrix was the opposite. Jimi Hendrix had to write the lyrics first because if not, the lyrics would all come out in a jumble, he said. Yeah.
Now, I know Metallica, for example, is music first as well. With Metallica, it starts with the riff. When they're going into every album cycle, they'll all submit their riffs. Lars is the architect of the songs. He'll be like, this one and this one go together. So he'll kind of find the pieces, put them together. Then Lars and James will shape the song. Yeah. But if you listen to the demos, it's all like wa-na-na lyrics. Ya-na, ya-na-na. He doesn't have lyrics, and he's working the melody out, and then the lyrics will come later.
And the road becomes my parade. Ya-na-na-na-na, ya-na. Wa-na-na-na-na-na, yeah. Wa-na-na-na-na, yeah. Wa-na-na-na-na. Ya-na-na-na-na, ya-na. Wa-na-na-na-na-na, yeah. Wa-na-na-na-na, yeah.
Have you heard about the lawsuit against Dua Lipa for levitating?
No, I haven't.
Part of it was, blah, 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 she lifted from this, she lifted from that. She was on a podcast where they played what's purported to be like the voice memo from when she was working with the producer. And it was, hamanema, hamana, hamanema, hamanema. She was just like making up the lyric, making up the syllables, but she was obviously workshopping the melody as she was going.
Oh, interesting.
Just like a real fly on the wall moment of somebody actually doing that.
My good friend Donnie Brown, he's the guy who used to play drums in the Verve Pipe. I remember there would be times I'd be just driving around with him or whatever. We'd be talking and he'd be like, hang on 1 second. And he'd grab his, then he had a little cassette recorder and he'd just hit record and either sing a line or sing a melody. And it's like, and then he'd be like, okay, what were we saying?
When it strikes, it strikes.
And it's like, you just want to get it down before you lose it.
Exactly.
So after the sodomy story, he actually goes into honesty. And what's interesting is he screws it up. He starts it an octave too high.
Oh, that's right.
And he starts playing it and he can tell it's wrong, but he can't figure out why at first. And then he stops and he's like, see, even we screw up.
And that comes back later too, funny enough.
He decides, he's like, I'm going to do the edited version. So he just plays like a verse in the chorus and then goes into the end, just to give an example. Oh, this is a funny bit. When he starts singing the song, I don't know if you caught this. You can tell he's like listening because he's not sure if it's coming through the house. You can see him kind of look, and then he goes, is it going out there? And then he turns it into a joke because he goes, is it going out there to each and every one of you?
I was listening to it and I must have missed that setup. I thought he was just like doing like a crooner joke.
He was listening to see if it was going out to the house.
Oh, hold on. I want to watch this now.
Yeah.
Oh, see what I mean? I'm not ready for this. Eddie, you told me I wasn't going to have to do this. See, even we forget. Okay. No, it doesn't start up there. It starts down here. This is sometimes I forget the words. Like Piano Man. Doing Piano Man for 10 years, right? It's 9 o'clock on, all right? And mine starts to drift. I wonder if they have beer backstage. That cheese looked pretty good, right? And then you go, there's a cheese on the man. And you go, and the audience is like, Well, the sound of 20,000 people going. It was like, you see the Cooney fight? You see the Cooney fight? Jerry Cooney and Larry Holmes? Okay. When he hit Larry Holmes in the chops, you never heard like 16,000 men going, "Ooh-ah!" Okay. If you search for tenderness, it isn't hard to find. You can have the love you need to live. Is it going out there? To each and every one of you. If you look for truthfulness, you might just as well be blind. It always seems to be so hard to give. Honesty is such a lonely word. Everyone is so untrue. Honesty is hardly ever heard, and mostly what I need from you. This is the edit here.
Little girl.
And well, it's actually right before that, talking about like screwing up, where he talks about messing up Piano Man because his mind wanders.
That's a variant of that story that he would go on to talk about in the future. I think at some point, Just the Way You Are was the song he used as the example, where he'd be like, oh, I wonder what's on the room service menu tonight. He's told that story, a variant of it, a number of times over the years.
Yeah, to that point, the one I always remember is, I wonder if they have a burger. Maybe I should get a burger when I get back to the room. It's funny. He just keeps workshopping different things. What's the funniest one,
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is the fun one. The next question is, someone asks him, what goes through your mind when you hear your song on the radio? And actually, I'm just going to play this little bit because it's funny.
I just wanted to know what goes through your mind when you're hearing a song that you wrote on the radio. What kind of feelings do you get?
Good. It doesn't suck, all right? I tell you, truthfully, you try to be cool, and it's on the radio now, but it's like, the songs are like my children. I felt like I've gone through a certain amount of labor, and I felt like I've given birth. It's a very painful process, for me anyway. And that's my kid, and when it's like my kid graduating from elementary school, and it's like you're really proud, that's my child, and that's my kid talking on the radio. I don't think of it as me, ego trip. It's like, ain't my kid doing good? Like that kind of thing. That's the feeling. It's really a great feeling. It really is. Except when it's speeded up and there's a skip in it. Right? Oh, my kid screwed up. Oh.
And it doesn't suck. He mentions that later, like when he's in the master classes, he's like, I'll answer early, but don't start with the, what was it like sleeping with Christy Brinkley? It didn't suck. That's when he's used later as well.
And then he kind of goes into the story about how his songs are like his children, which is another running theme. I like this one, the way this guy frames the question. It actually causes Billy to laugh. He says,
Do you ever, it seems like you're really enjoying yourself up there, and I can appreciate what it would be to be famous, just because I'm not. But do you ever miss just being one of the crowd, or do you ever think about that after you were famous, and what it would be like to just be anonymous again?
Yes. Once in a while, I go to Yankee Stadium and I want to watch a ball game. I either have to wear a disguise, or it's so tough. No, it's not. It's just once in a while you do just kind of. I just want to be a regular person, but you deal with it. It's just something you do. I'm still not used to it. I still think it's funny. There he is. That's it. And I'm like, who are they looking at? Right? Because it's like when I was in high school. Oh, here comes Billy Joel. Here comes Billy Joel. And now it's here comes Billy Joel. Like, what's your real name? That kind of thing. I want to see a ball game, right? I want to sit and I want to eat the hot dog and the popcorn. These kids are all lined up in front of me, going, "Can I have an autograph? Can I have an autograph?" And all these people around me are mad. That really is even worse than just me wanting to be by myself, because all these people, these diehard Yankee fans, are, "You get the hell out of here! I can't see a game."
Somebody asked him about how he deals with stage fright. It tends to happen to him when he begins to overthink what he's doing.
That plays into, that idea that like he doesn't like to practice that much. He doesn't like to like rehearse with the band too much. He likes to be fresh. He likes people on the edge of their kind of paying attention a little more.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah. And he says, when he overthinks it, he's like, your brain does so much better on muscle memory that when you're in the moment, if you're trying to analyze what you're doing too much, it'll throw you.
You know what's been happening to me lately? We do Everybody Loves You Now. We've been playing that one since like Jump. But lately I've been overthinking the end and I go one riff too many, like every single time lately, like in practice. Because I'm not just on autopilot with it anymore. Like I'm just like, okay, how many times does this happen? How many times did we do it? Next thing you know, the whole band's looking at me. I'm like, no, I did it again.
So someone asked him, do you do anything special to prepare your voice? And he basically says, I do nothing good. I drink and I smoke. And basically he always wanted to sound like Ray Charles. So he's trying to louse his voice up to sound like Ray Charles.
And we've heard him do Ray Charles. Certainly heard him do Joe Cocker. But I was so pleasantly surprised to hear him do Richie Havens.
I know.
And that the audience in 82 caught it. Now, Richie Havens has regularly put out albums into the 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
But, his days of fame, like, mainstream fame was, mostly done by the mid-70s, being a household name sort of thing.
Right.
And he did pretty good Richie Havens, too. I was very impressed by that. I did not see it coming.
He did a Steve Winwood. He said basically Steve Winwood was trying to do Joe Cocker, trying to do Ray Charles.
Right.
And then he said, what did he say? And then take out the top teeth and you have Richie Havens. So he's
take out the top teeth.
Yeah. So basically like all his favorite singers were basically trying to do Ray Charles.
Which is an interesting genealogy to consider.
I do intentionally change my voice from song to song. I says, today I'm going to be Steve Winwood. You know what I mean? What's that song he does? Yeah, okay. Come down off your throne. Little frog. I have warmed up, okay. Leave your money home. See, that kind of thing. It's still trying to be Ray Charles, but the white version of it, right? Then you have the, you can do a lot of voices just trying to be Ray Charles. Then you have the Joe Cocker version, right? Trying to be Ray Charles, right? You are so beautiful. Right? He's trying to do Ray Charles too. He doesn't make any lie about it. He says, I'm trying, but he's from Wales, and Ray Charles. You can't understand what he's saying. Then you have, from Joe Cocker, if you do Joe Cocker, you can do Richie Havens. You just take out the top teeth. Hey, look yonder, tell me, what do you see? Now, these are all ways of developing a singing style through trying to be somebody you're never going to be. You weren't born to do that, but you're going to try. You have an idol, you have someone you look up to, and the different stages you go through, you find out different things about your voice, and they come in handy.
Next question starts with a statement that has nothing to do with the question. It basically says they like Allentown. They like the song.
Yeah. You remember when you wrote Allentown?
That was awesome. But the actual question in this one is there a particular classical musician that influences your music? He goes on to discuss the reason for the name Allentown and basically says, it sounded very American and it fit the motif of the album. And he discusses and does a little bit of the Allentown writing process, living here in Allentown and there's really not much going down,
I'm dying here in Allentown.
Right. And then they put us under the ground. This is another interesting one. Next question is, how do you prevent Billy Joel from becoming a product? So this is that segment that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I thought it was great. He kind of starts off with a joke and you think he's going to be flippant, and then he really goes into it. And it's a really rare glimpse.
And ultimately, Billy says, you have to protect yourself and you got to be involved.
You have to get involved with a certain amount of what the business is that goes on. You may not know what they're talking about, but you have to protect yourself from being marketed, because they'll take an album, right, or a piece of music, something that you've worked arduously and you put your heart and your soul into it, and you're very sensitive about it, and it's like this beautiful thing, and then they'll go out and buy the new Billy Joel album, it's the most wonderful thing. It's like, wait a minute, no, that wasn't the idea I really had in mind. It's the greatest thing since the first coming. Go buy, So you have to say, no, wait a minute, you have to get involved even with the advertising. You can't cover everything. They will use the hard sell. It's the music business is a business, and they want to sell, and they want to compete, and they want to outdo, and they want to move units, right? We moved a lot of units today, Bill. That's nice. How's the record going? A lot of units moved, and love your new product, right? Let's say Procter and Gamble. Love my new product, and they're going to refer to it like that. Don't get put off. That's their, it's the terminology they use in the marketplace. So I get involved with it because I said I will have nothing to do with the business. I am an artiste. I wore a beret for a while. I'm an artiste. I know nothing from this business thing. And go buy, Billy Joel album, on sale right now, and also you get new Blue Cheer if you act now. Wait a minute, I gotta shut this right down. And I started to get involved. It's something you're gonna have to learn in general how the business things work: promotion, advertising, even if they do pick a single, how it's edited. Because they'll take a single and say, we want that for a single, but it's 5 minutes long. We got to cut it down to 3 minutes. So, like Pressure, right? I got involved with the edit on it. They could have done it like this. Okay, now you're halfway through the song. You've only had to...
I got it.
3 minutes. Okay, that's it. That's what they would. So you have to get involved with all those things. You don't have to sell out either. You can lay it on the line and say, look, Jack, I know you got to promote. I know you got to market. I know you got to advertise on stuff. But this is me, and it's got to represent me as far down the line as it can go. And hopefully you have some control over it. Other than that, otherwise they'll throw you out there like a box of cornflakes.
I'm curious. And this is like, I don't have a good conclusion on this, but I want to know sort of where Elizabeth factors into this. She was like kind of the boogeyman in a lot of ways. She took a lot of the heat from people, but how much did she do on behalf of Billy, and how much did, where Billy didn't have to be the bad guy maybe, or, he didn't have to like step up and be the one involved, where it's a nice sleight of hand when like you can make these demands, but you do it through somebody else. So you always look like the nice guy.
Right. Yeah.
This is 110% conjecture, but I'm just wondering what that dynamic was like in this sense.
How much of his forcefulness was coming through her, or was it mostly her? It's hard to say. Yeah.
Or did he learn that from her?
The one thing it's interesting, he talks a little bit about radio edits, how he actually gets involved a bit with where they make the cuts.
Yeah, what was he saying? Like, yeah, you can't just stop at 3:05. Like,
yeah, and he's like, you have to learn to sit. Like halfway through Pressure, stops. Next question: somebody talks about home court advantage, and do you like playing in New York more than anywhere else? And I like this. Billy talks about the pros and cons of New York. He's like, it's New York, it's home. We always know we're home, so that always feels good. And he's like, but it's stressful because all your friends are there and your family is there and the band's family, everyone is there. So it's stressful.
Yeah, another thing you wouldn't really think of that way.
And he's like, I can go into Kansas City and be loose. It doesn't matter because no one's there. He's like, I don't know anybody in Kansas City. It's a heightened situation when it's in New York, and I think he can be a little looser when he's elsewhere.
To that point, what does he say on Live from Long Island?
Yeah, that's right. Everybody we ever knew in our whole life was here. Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening, Long Island. Okay. Everybody we ever knew in our whole life is here.
He says they're running out of time. He's going to wrap it up with a song. And then that's when you start getting the shouts from the audience of what they want to hear. I heard quite a few Viennas from the crowd. And I think maybe seen some Italian restaurant I heard. So some of what became the classics that weren't hits, people were yelling out, which was pretty cool.
That's a good point. Yeah, those weren't the singles. I love that, true to what he was saying about, not being a product, you have to be in control of it. He plays Where's the Orchestra with a nod to Allentown at the end,
right? But
still does Where's the Orchestra. And it sounded really good.
It is. Yeah. He says, let me play a new one because I like the new stuff. He's always excited about the new stuff. So, he goes, and of all the songs to play, that's the one he does. I thought that was such a nice version. In fact, spoiler alert, my playlist episode coming up this summer where I'm doing the Nylon Curtain live, that's going to be the version I'm using for Where's the Orchestra. He's done it in recent years at the Garden, which I like, but I just love 1982 Billy singing that song, so that's the version I chose.
And the show ends there. They roll the credits, and Night School is never heard from again until Frank Zappa writes his book and comes up with a completely different Night School.
And I noticed a little something in the credits. So I'm scrolling through, it's no secret that Jack and I are big Seinfeld fans. We're always dropping little bits of Seinfeld throughout. And I'm actually in the middle of a rewatch for the 20 millionth time. I'm currently in season 4. So I'm watching the credits, the end credits of this. And what name do I see pop up on my screen but Joe Davola?
Crazy Joe Davola.
Crazy Joe Davola. I'm going to put the kibosh on you.
Hey, Jerry.
I've kiboshed before, and I will kibosh again.
So now it's on to you. Head on over to YouTube. Give Night School a look. Tell us what you think. Did you enjoy it? Were you pleasantly surprised like we were? Did you catch anything that Billy Joel has said later or earlier in his career that we didn't catch here? Another piece of conceptual continuity, if you will.
We'll put a link to the video in our show notes as well, too. So if you haven't seen it yet, you can check it out. Such a interesting snapshot of Billy's headspace in 1982. And I really like that because that, to me, is a fascinating period of his career. Nylon Curtain is probably my number 2 album of all time of his. I love to hear his excitement for Where's the Orchestra, and I love to hear him talking about, the new album. And it's really cool to see how, even at this stage, how he really wants to, pay it back to the artists and really wants to help them out and help them avoid some of the pitfalls he's run into over the years. And, there were more coming that happened after this. He's a good case study of things to look out for.
Things were on full display here. He was really an open book.
Absolutely. And I love how candid he is and how open he is. And this is really a very personable side of Billy that doesn't always come across. It feels very approachable during this.
So tell us what you think.
Yeah, you can email us at glasshousespodcast@gmail.com. We love your stories, your insights, and even your corrections. So we love you catching stuff that we miss or we just don't get fit into the episode. So we love all of that. So please write in anytime. And you can find us on the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you search Glass House's Billy Joel Podcast, you'll find us there. And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, head on over there. It just takes 2 minutes to leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review. That just tells the almighty Apple algorithms that we are a worthwhile podcast. You can play such an instrumental role to help us continue to grow the podcast. We are into year 3 and we're closing in on 100,000 downloads. And it's all because of you all. You've been spreading the word. You've been sharing our posts. You've been really instrumental and very helpful in helping us get to continue to grow it and continue to produce these because there's a long way to go. And you're the reason we keep doing it.
Everything Michael said and more. And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Let me play a new one because I like the new stuff. All right.
Where's the orchestra? Wasn't this supposed to be a musical? Here I am in the balcony. How the hell could I have missed the overture? mature. I like the scenery, even though I have absolutely known idea at all what is being said despite the dialogue. There's the leading man, the movie star who never faced an audience. Where's the orchestra? After all, this is my big night on the town, my introduction to the theater crowd. And I assumed that a show would have a song, so I was wrong. At least I understand all the innuendo and the irony, and I appreciate the roles the actors played and the point the author made. And after the closing lines, and after the curtain calls, the curtain falls on empty chairs. Where's the orchestra?
Thank you. Good luck. Kick ass.
You know, I've kiboshed before.
And I will kibosh again.